B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Monday, March 12th, 2018. In Britain, Prime Minister Theresa May is pointing the finger at Moscow for the poisoning, allegedly by nerve agent, of a former double agent for Russia and the Soviet Union. He goes way back. And let me say that what Theresa May is alleging today is likely true. I don't think that some outside actors or hackers in St. Petersburg or even let's exonerate Hillary Clinton. I don't think they are at all likely suspects for the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. It happened on March 4th in the lovely postcard-perfect town of Salisbury. They've got a nice cathedral there. I've been in it. And this has led to a wave of speculation. And today, Theresa May said that it's highly likely that Russia is to blame for the poisoning of that former Russian spy. Said Mrs. May in the House of Commons, "It is now clear that Mr. Skripal and his daughter were poisoned with a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia." Now, listen to the carefully crafted language here. Consistent with, a type like. And so what she's saying is she can't prove it 100%. Nevertheless, the government has concluded, quote, that it is highly likely that Russia was responsible for the act against the Skripals, father and daughter. And then she said that either the poisoning was a direct act of the Russian state against our country, or that Moscow, has lost control of its nerve agent and allowed it to get into the hands of others. And while that's kind of a silly set of hypotheticals, at least the second one, it gives them some wiggle room. And Theresa May gave Moscow 36 hours to respond. And if there is no credible response, we will conclude this action amounts to an unlawful use of force by the Russian state against the United Kingdom, and I will come back to this House and set out the full range of measures we will take in response. So it's an unspecified threat. And will Moscow respond? Well, the only commentary we've heard was from an anchor on one of the state networks last week who warned Russians not to betray their country, and if you do, don't choose Britain as a place to live. And this brings up many issues that Americans hold about the complex figure who runs Russia, named Vladimir Putin. And I do believe that Putin is a cold-blooded killer who does order people executed. And in that, he is not alone, as we will enumerate for you in a few minutes as we look at the history of assassinations conducted by the State of Israel. But it's important to note that this guy Skripal goes way back. He had worked for Russian military intelligence. Then he became a double agent selling secrets to Britain. He was found out, convicted, sent to a Russian prison from which he was freed. He spent about 4 years there, and he was released in 2010 and sent to Britain in a spy swap. Now, being an agent is risky. Being a double agent is really life-threatening. And while I don't rationalize this attempt to kill Skripal, I think it kind of comes with the territory. And we need to stay focused not on the personality of Vladimir Putin and what he does to former members of his profession, but on the big picture and policies toward the United States. And I want to commend my old friend Ray McGovern. He co-wrote a piece with Gilbert Doctorow published at Consortium News, noting that on March 8th, 4 United States senators wrote a letter to Secretary of State Rexon Tillerson, urging him to begin arms limitation or arms reduction talks with Russia. Now, this was the whole point of Putin's speech on March 1st, where he unveiled a new generation of weapons claimed by the Russian military. and said, since the U.S. walked away from the ABM treaty under George W. Bush in 2002, we have repeatedly asked to re-engage with the United States, but we just get shined on. So the letter, signed by Dianne Feinstein of California, Edward Markey of Massachusetts, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and Jeff Merkley of Oregon, does, of course, trot through all of the, the common language about Russia and how they meddled in our election and they're evildoers, but they're saying this is something we should respond to. They're calling on the Secretary of State to send U.S. personnel to negotiate with Putin and his underlings. And I think this is a very important thing to focus on, much more so than an attempt to poison a former Russian double agent in England. And so while Dianne Feinstein often hears criticism, she probably doesn't listen to it, but she could hear criticism from me if she listened, this is a step that I commend her for. And I think it's important for us to note that the corporate media hasn't even acknowledged that this letter was written, much less the important underlying issues. And in a think piece by their Washington bureau chief, the New York Times today raises some significant questions here about how Trump is simultaneously trying to seduce Kim Jong-un into a nuclear disarmament deal. He is trying to get out of the Iranian deal that was signed by the U.S. and 6 other nations. Not a unilateral accord like what Trump is expected to try to negotiate with Kim. And so these are really important contradictions. Why would Kim trust the United States to cut a deal with him when we're not honoring the deal that was made by Trump's predecessor with Iran? But the article doesn't mention Russia at all. It focuses just on North Korea and Iran and on Trump's obsession with them, so to speak. But this is a critical matter. And with Putin standing there saying, do you want to talk? I've got new weapons that can defeat your missile defense, which we know is bogus anyway. You want to talk? And instead, we sent Megyn Kelly to Moscow. And on March 1st, the night of his important speech about the new Soviet weapons generation, I said Soviet, I should have said Russian, Kelly got an interview. I guess she spoke to him that evening and then again the next day. And NBC started to run the product, heavily edited and full of a lot of American jingoism, on Friday night. And in that, Megyn Kelly kept pressing him, hey, did Russia meddle in our elections? Will you extradite the St. Petersburg Troll Farm 13 to the United States? And what Putin said in a lengthy answer, and I'm reading an American translation published by the New York Times, maybe they are not even Russians, but Ukrainians, Tatars, or Jews, but with Russian citizenship, which should also be checked. Maybe they have dual citizenship or a green card. Maybe the U.S. paid them for this. How can you know? I do not know either. So, because he used the word Jews and appeared to be musing about whether they might have been involved in the Russian-based meddling in the U.S. election that's been alleged, not proven, well, we have to look at the translation. And I saw, starting on Saturday, all of these posts on Facebook of people who took the term and said, see, he's anti-Semitic. And this is so reflexive. And it shows the hair trigger for most Americans about their Russophobia. So Elliot Borenstein, or Borenstein, is a Russia scholar at NYU. And in an op-ed in today's Washington Post, headlined, Was Putin Really Blaming Jews for Interfering in the U.S. Election? The headline answers the question, probably not. Now, this is a useful headline, especially if it gets posted in social media, because if it were just the question, many people would assume they know the answer and not bother to click on it and read the article. But Borenstein says this statement has been overblown, and there's a surprising explanation. Semantics, not anti-Semitism, may be behind Putin's gaffe. It's a language issue, not an ethnic or religious one. And what he points out is that there are two terms in Russian. One is Ruski, with two S's and two I's. This functions as an adjective and noun, describes the language, culture, literature, and art of Russia. And it applies to people who we might call ethnic Russians, descendants of Eastern Orthodox Slavs who make up the country's majority population. Then there is Rossiyskiy, Rossiyskii. It also means Russian, an adjective that applies to the multinational, multi-ethnic Russian state, and the noun Rossiyanin, which refers to a citizen of Russia, regardless of ethnic heritage. And going back to the Soviet era, for whatever reason, Jews were described as Jews. They lived in Russia, but that was the label that was applied to them. So this is something that is a long-standing term in Russia. And while many people infer a malevolence in Putin's response, I really think that this is seriously exaggerated. And now we have Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, based on this, writing a letter to Trump demanding extradition for the St. Petersburg 13 from the troll farm. And Putin already ruled that out in the interview with Megyn Kelly, and it's a joke. It's never going to happen. And Bob Mueller knew that when he crafted the indictments that he issued for publicity. That's why he did it. And so this is another one of those dust-ups where we see the forces in the United States, particularly those that are now cemented with the Democratic Party, and they blame Russia, and they reflexively defend Israel, even when Israel isn't attacked. And to claim that this is virulent and long-term anti-Semitism, I think is just a huge exaggeration. And Ray McGovern has a second kind of a review piece up at Consortium News today about the Megyn Kelly interviews. And Ray, who is fluent in Russian, actually watched the Russian TV version and was able to translate some of the things that Putin was saying. So he says Kelly tried repeatedly to make the case that the U.S. decision to scrap the ABM treaty was a result of the terrorist attacks of 9/11, when she said the United States was reassessing its security posture. And Putin's reply translated is complete nonsense. But in Russian, it was polny chush, chush ringing with onomatopoeia and a polite rendering of BS. Putin explained that 9/11 and the missile defense system are completely unrelated, adding that even housewives are able to understand that. He found occasion to use polny chush or simply chush several times during the interview. And at one point, after an interruption, Putin said, "You keep interrupting me. This is impolite." Megyn Kelly apologized, but she went on to interrupt him some more. And then after she pressed him, he said, and let me read McGovern's comment here. No doubt fully briefed on the fact that Kelly sports a law degree, Putin asked, "Do you have people with legal training? We cannot even launch an investigation without cause. Give us at least an official inquiry with a statement of facts. Send us an official paper." And this is an important point. We have passed sanctions on Russia, we have demonized the country, and we have never publicly proven that Russia was responsible for anything more than the troll farm activities that are still not fully proven. So Kelly responded, "Isn't it enough that U.S. intelligence agencies and now a special prosecutor with a criminal indictment? Is that enough? Not enough for you to look into it? Absolutely not. If you do not have legal training, I can assure you that an inquiry is required for this." And Kelly says, "Well, I do." So this is theater. And as McGovern points out, Putin was posturing for his domestic audience. The entire interview was broadcast in Russia, unedited, and without the demonic voiceovers that NBC added to the American broadcast. So I encourage you to be open-minded, to think skeptically, and not to get sucked into this Russia baiting and Russia bashing that is so prevalent in our country today. And now, as promised, I want to take a look at some of the actions of the State of Israel. First up, Alison Weir, who is a respected critic of Israel and a humanitarian who supports the rights and aspirations of the Palestinians. She operates a blog called If Americans Knew, and they had a YouTube channel with a number of videos showing horrific treatment of Palestinians by Israeli soldiers. And they received a notice from YouTube at one point that one of the videos had been flagged for review, and then, without warning, YouTube terminated their entire channel. And then, after they appealed it, there was no response from YouTube until, after a few days, an email arrived. After a review of your account, we have confirmed that your YouTube account is not in violation of our terms of service. As such, we have unsuspended your account. So why was it suspended in the first place? Well, Alison Weir exposes the wide array of trolls. Some are volunteers, some are paid students, some are members of the Israeli military. And they are intently focused on scrubbing the internet of any content that is critical of the State of Israel. They also are doctoring Wikipedia entries on a very consistent basis. And let's see, they have a new media desk that focuses on YouTube and other social media sites. There is a program called, a project to do battle on the Internet initiated in 2011 by the 300,000-strong National Union of Israeli Students. The goal to deepen and expand Hasbara, state propaganda, activities of the students in the State of Israel. Under this program, students are paid $2,000, and it's not clear here whether that's monthly or annually or what, but they get $2,000 to work 5 hours a week to lead the battle against hostile websites. They work on 4 teams: content, Wikipedia, monitoring, and new media. And this is all detailed in the article that I've linked to in the show file for today's podcast. But that's not all. There are other paid operations that are funded by the Israeli Knesset. One of them is an app called ACT-IL, a wide-ranging grassroots campaign app that lets individuals combat BDS, that's boycott, divestment, and sanctions, in the palm of their hand. ACT-IL is more than just an app. It is a campaign that taps into the collective knowledge of IDC students who together speak 35 languages, hail from 86 countries, and have connections to the pro-Israel community all over the world. And this is no surprise. The project is led by former Israeli intelligence officers and has close ties to American casino billionaire Sheldon Adelson. Another funder is the Paul Singer Foundation. He's the vulture capitalist who owns a lot of the paper of Puerto Rico these days. Now to a fascinating piece published by my friend Charles Glass. Charlie Glass has been covering the Middle East since the 1970s when he worked for Peter Jennings at the ABC Bureau I think it was in Tel Aviv at the time. And Charlie is a good friend of one of my brothers. And The Intercept published what is essentially a review and commentary on a new book by the Israeli journalist Ronan Bergman called Rise and Kill First: The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. And the book names names and shows the history of extrajudicial, face-to-face murders committed by men who went on to become Prime Minister of Israel, including Menachem Begin, Yitzhak Shamir, Ariel Sharon, and Ehud Barak. And they go into detail here about some of the specific operations. Ariel Sharon's massacre of at least 99 people on the West Bank in 1953 was notable. Also, in 1973, Israel launched one of the biggest targeted killing operations of the 20th century, if not the biggest, to kill 3 Palestinian officials in Beirut. 65 operatives led by Ehud Barak, dressed as a woman, paddled ashore in rubber dinghies, supported by 3,000 other personnel. So there's interesting detail here. Charlie Glass does quibble with Bergman's claim that Israel has assassinated more people than any other country in the Western world. Glass feels that the U.S. Holds that dubious honor hands down. And one more item on Israel and American Jews. Friday night, Bill Maher hosted on his show for the second time in 5 weeks a young woman who I consider to be very dangerous. Her name is Bari Weiss, Bariwiss. And Bari Weiss is a very attractive 30-something, extremely well-spoken individual who got on the show. And Bill Maher said, well, we're both fighting the outrage machine and the fringe on the left. And so he invited her to tell a story about how she got a lot of backlash on Twitter after she tweeted about the Japanese-American Olympian who did the triple axel in the South Korean Olympic Games. And he allowed Bari Weiss to go on and say, I despise xenophobia, and to posture as a defender of free speech. But Glenn Greenwald, in a powerful piece published on March 8th at The Intercept, really undresses Bari Weiss and shows that when she was at Columbia University, she denounced left-wing intolerance for dissent, and she has become some sort of a paragon of free expression and academic freedom when her history is directly the opposite. Now, this is a lengthy piece, 17 pages, that Greenwald wrote, but I've linked to it in the show file for today's podcast, and I encourage you to check it out. My biggest gripe about Bill Maher, I enjoy his show, and, I don't always agree with him. There are a lot of things where I think he's off base. But he allows people like Bari Weiss to come on his show, and he never gives his viewers any indication of the history of these people. It's just, oh, yeah, she works at the New York Times on the op-ed page. Well, there's a lot that people should know, and if you watch Maher on a regular basis, I hope you will investigate this as well. Every day I pause for a moment and thank people who support my podcast with your subscriptions. People like John Molitor, he kicks in $20 a month. Stuart Russell, $10 a month. Andy Rush, Mark Brodsky, they're all reliable people who kick in $5, $10, $20 a month to support my work. And your numbers have not been growing. I just have to be honest with you. It could be my pointed commentary offends a lot of people and it sends them away. I guess that's the issue. But I need new subscribers, and I need you very much. So visit peterbcollins.com. No matter what device or browser you use, you'll find the menu button. Click on that and pull it down, then click on Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and boom, you can choose the level of support you like. And if you prefer to avoid PayPal, I fully understand. You can drop me anything you like in the mail. My P.O. Box is Box 150, 660, San Rafael, California, 94915. That's Box 150, 660, San Rafael, 94915. Well, over the weekend, the DNC held a meeting. They made a lot of pleasant noises about respecting the grassroots, about the need to scale back the role of superdelegates in the selection process for presidential nominees, and then they did nothing. They postponed action on the recommendations of the Unity Committee, while, as I said, making a lot of great noises about how they need to end the perception of the superdelegate influence. Well, don't just end the perception. Fix it. But the actual outcome of that is still awaiting a final action by the DNC. Meanwhile, there's a lot of focus on the Pittsburgh district, congressional district, where there's a special election tomorrow. The almost Democrat running is a guy named Connor Lamb. And before we get to his opponent and Trump's support for him, Connor Lamb is like another Doug Jones. Doug Jones, the guy from Alabama, who narrowly beat Roy Moore after Roy Moore defeated himself with exposure of his dalliances with teenage girls. Well, Doug Jones is barely a Democrat. He voted with the Republicans critically on several bills already. And this guy, Connor Lamb, I get emails every hour from these Democratic groups. Chip in $3, Peter. Connor Lamb's going to win. Well, this is bullshit. All right? Connor Lamb is barely a Democrat. And whether he wins or not is so unimportant because this seat is going to be drawn out. It will disappear for the November election. So whoever wins tomorrow between Connor Lamb and his Republican opponent gets to serve for 9 months, and then they have to run in a different district. Pennsylvania got caught with extreme gerrymandering, and they are currently trying to remap the state. But this district is not part of the new map. And like 25% of the Democratic congressional challengers who are running this year, Connor Lamb is a former Marine and a federal prosecutor. Is that the profile of the Democratic Party that you know and that you could support? I don't think so. A lot of money is being squandered on this race, and as I say, the outcome will be almost meaningless. But that didn't stop Trump. He flew into Pittsburgh, held a rally in an airport hangar on Saturday evening, and I was unfortunate enough to catch the coverage on CNN. I tuned in minutes before he really pointed both barrels of his figurative weapons at the media, fake news. He pointed at them in the crowd, got his fans to boo them. Fortunately, there was no violence. But it was that kind of us versus them mentality that Trump revels in. And to see him on display, really, without any limitations, there are no people who can control Trump. And he was bragging, he was bullying, he was full of bombast, he was lying wherever he got the chance. And he was pandering to the people who showed up, who I think are a real good cross-section of the people who follow him on Twitter. Because they applauded when he said clean coal is coming back. Pennsylvania knows that's a lie. He said steel is coming back because he's threatened tariffs. He said aluminum is coming back. Well, they're not going to come back in any significant way. Trump knows he's lying about that. The people who listen to him know that he's lying about that. And yet they applaud because they came for bullshit and they got it. Perhaps the lowest point was when Trump, using the opposition research of the Republican Party, repeatedly tried to link Connor Lamb to Nancy Pelosi. And as part of his shtick in running for this seat in a purple or a red district, Connor Lamb has already said he won't vote for Nancy Pelosi for Democratic leader or for speaker should that opportunity arise. But they're spending a lot of money on TV ads that link Connor Lamb to Nancy Pelosi. And in a virtually all-white district, Trump took it one step lower. He attacked Maxine Waters, and then he said not once but twice that Maxine Waters is a low IQ individual. Now, we know that is a racist dog whistle. And he gets away with it time and time again. He's not called to account in the corporate media. The New York Times suggested that it might be interpreted as racist. And now they've got a fact check of the comments, the lies that he told. I'll just run them down for you briefly. He said we spent $7 trillion in the Middle East over a 7-year period. The actual number is $1.88 trillion right now, and it will go up because of the cost of veterans' health care. But he is misquoting the wrong statistic there. He says, ISIS, we have 98% of the land back. Remember his secret plan to defeat ISIS? Well, we never saw it implemented. The Islamic State has left most of the territories they claimed as caliphate, but Trump didn't have a thing to do with it. Of course, in his world, everything has to do with Trump. We've created 3 million jobs since Election Day. Kind of true, but he takes credit for the last quarter of Obama's term And when you compare his first 13 months with Obama's last 13 months, the job creation is about the same. And let's see, he bragged about black unemployment being at its lowest level. Again, he hasn't earned any credit for that, but it won't stop him from taking it. We passed the biggest tax cut in history. That is a lie, and so on and so on. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers are dancing around trying to keep Stormy Daniels off 60 Minutes, and in doing so, they're essentially proving that her stories are more or less true. And this, of course, when you make your own reality, a guy like Trump, they figure, we just got to keep lying. We got to keep denying. But 60 Minutes was planning to run the Stormy Daniels interview last night. And when I got home, I turned on the DVR, and there were 2 episodes of 60 Minutes recorded, but it was the same show. It didn't include the Betsy DeVos meltdown and didn't include Stormy Daniels. So I don't know what was going on at CBS last night, but they now say they're planning to run the interview next Sunday. It's important to note that the hush deal that Stormy Daniels signed doesn't include CBS or any other media outlet, so she's the one who would be vulnerable. And she, through her attorney, is now asking if she can return the $130,000 in hush money so she can stop being hushed. And I don't think that's going to get him anywhere. My take on this is that when she accepted the money, it was a binding contract, even if you and I don't approve of what it is a contract for. There is a growing neo-Nazi group in the United States called Atomwaffen, and it's been exposed by veteran reporters at ProPublica, led by A.C. Thompson. And in a new podcast interview that is posted today at whowhatwhy.org, your humble host interviews A.C. Thompson. And what's really chilling is that Atomwaffen is linked to 5 murders across the country in the last 8 or 9 months, including one in January in Orange County, California. Yet the FBI, according to A.C. Thompson, shows no signs of interest in Atomwaffen. And the group appears to have seen a surge in membership after the Charlottesville events last summer. They don't seem to be particularly fascinated by Trump. And here's an excerpt from my conversation about Atomwaffen with reporter A.C. Thompson.
This is my concern. My concern is that I believe the law enforcement community, from the locals to the state investigators to the FBI, are generally several years behind when it comes to tracking these groups. When I look at the sort of intel bulletins that they're putting out and I look at the sort of research they're doing, a lot of it is talking about stuff from 80s and 90s. It's just not relevant now. And it's been hard, I think, for them to track this massive explosion in activity over the last 2 years. What I would say is I do not believe that the FBI has eyes inside Atomwaffen. I do not believe that they have been able to or have wanted to effectively investigate the group. And I think it's a little surprising because this is a group that when they first come on the scene back in the middle of last year, it's because one of their members murders 2 of their other members, and federal agents find that the founder of the group has been compiling radiological material and bomb-making material, and that he's got a framed picture of Tim McVeigh next to a picture of the Fuhrer in his bedroom. And the allegations at that time by a former member were that this guy, the founder of the group, was planning to blow up a nuclear power plant. So that's the middle of last year. Since that time, I do not believe that the federal government has effectively infiltrated this group, and I do not believe that they have, I know for sure they haven't disrupted the group.
You can grab the full interview with reporter A.C. Thompson. It's available at whowhatwhy.org today. Finally today, I just want to share a quick story. Disney released a new movie that just did okay over the weekend. It's called A Wrinkle in Time, based on the children's book by Madeleine L'Engle. And this is a triumph for my friend Catherine Hand. She is given credit as a producer on the film, but the story is much deeper than that. Catherine was so infatuated with A Wrinkle in Time as a child that when she grew up and was working for Norman Lear, she got him to buy the rights to A Wrinkle in Time. And after many years, Norman Lear said it's not his thing, he wouldn't produce it, and so he gave the rights to the screenplay to my friend Catherine. She worked very hard for years. ABC Television did a made-for-TV movie about 10 years ago that wasn't very good, and so Disney bankrolled the new version of A Wrinkle in Time, over $100 million worth. They recruited Ava DuVernay to direct. She got Oprah and Reese Witherspoon and other actresses to be a part of it. And so the movie isn't getting the greatest reviews. I watched it over the weekend. I thought it was okay. It's a little preachy. There's a little too much Oprah. But the child actors in the film are excellent. And if you love the story of A Wrinkle in Time and you want to share it with a new generation, I encourage you to do so. But my friend Catherine raised 3 children, including her youngest, Megan, who I believe is named for Meg in A Wrinkle in Time, and her husband Patrick, who was my friend. That's how I met Catherine 20-plus years ago. He died when he was only 49 years old. He left her as a widow with 3 young children. And she persevered. And she really kept to her dream. I want A Wrinkle in Time to be a major motion picture on the big screen. Catherine, you did it. You really did it. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it with absolutely everyone. I remain Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.